Welcome back to our shop just outside Kennesaw here in North Georgia. My name's Larry. Today's project is going to be these two 1979 Thomasville side tables. They are, I believe, mahogany and walnut veneered tops. I'll show them to you just a second. The owners are extremely fastidious people that took exceptionally good care of this furniture. This looks almost brand new. However, over the years, the veneer has moved a little bit, and we have some cracking on this 40-year-old lacquer finish. So what I'm going to wind up doing is trying to polish this finish up, preserving the color, and then using this, we're going to strip the top of this one, which is in worse shape, and then use this to color match this back to where it was. But let me bring you in and I'll show you what we're dealing with, and we'll get to work. And this is the piece that's in better shape, what I believe to be a walnut field with mahogany banding. And you can see the grain on the mahogany is very straight, and I hope you can see there's just a little bit of roughness here along the grain lines of the mahogany. So that's what we're going to be trying to get out. The second piece is in a little bit worse shape. It has that roughness along the mahogany veneer, and I've got you captured in raking light. You can see right there that the finish has cracked and broken, and because of the level of care that the owners give these pieces, I want these to be as close to perfect as I can. And because of this, and you see here the broken finish here, I'm going to strip this piece and we're going to build that finish right back up. And the first step was to wrap the entire piece in plastic and painter's tape. This is what I used to wrap with. It's a little expensive, but it works really well, and it's easy to use. What we're going to do next is to start to wet sand it. I'm going to start with 320 wet dry on a block. I'm going to use mineral spirits as a lubricant, and let's see how it goes. Before I get aggressive and use the power sander or the air sander, I'm going to do it by hand. I want to be very, very careful we don't burn through the finish and into any color that might be on the piece. So here we go. And I'm trying to go with the grain of the mosaic, which makes things even harder. But for starters, let's try that and see how we do. Okay, we are getting a smooth finish, which is outstanding. That means that we don't have that much raising of the grain and the finish. So I think we're going to be able to get this smoothed out with 320, and then we'll bump it up to 500, and then we'll start to apply some finish. So let me keep up on this, and I will bring you back. I'm very pleased how the light sanding with 320 worked. It took out all of the roughness that we had in the finish, and again, the best way to determine your roughness is to run your hand around it. All the roughness in the finish is gone, and any of the little nicks or scratches that were in the finish also sanded out. Now, a lot of this is credit to the owners because the scratches and the nicks were very small and didn't go very deep in the finish. But we're really had an outstanding result so far. I'm going to kick this up to 500 grit, polish this up a little bit with 500 grit, and then we're going to move on to sealing it if we can. Hopefully we don't have any silicone contamination to worry about, and then we'll start to build a top coat on it. But here's the paper I'm going to use. It's actually 600 grit wet dry. That's what I have. Sanding block. We're back at it. Okay, you can see this is how we do it. I'll bring you back when this step is done. I'm often asked what I use for sealer. This is what I use. Let's get a seal coat on this table. And we've given the seal coat a little time to harden up. You can see, I hope, that any of the little sanding scratches have been taken out by the seal coat. So now I've got some 4/0 steel wool with the grain running this way, of course, and very gently We're going to rub this seal coat as smooth as we can get it and evaluate whether we need to put a second coat of sealer on it or move right on to our gloss lacquer. And as I'm looking at this, I'm very happy the way it's coated the top. I think this area right here might be just a little thin. And I think what I want to do is put a second coat of sealer on this. We're going to be applying a top coat of gloss lacquer, and gloss is extremely unforgiving when it comes to any flaws in the wood. It shows it up immediately. So let me finish rubbing out this seal coat. I'm going to shoot another coat of sealer. We'll let that dry. I'm going to come back. I'm going to rub that down with steel wool, and we'll see how we look from there. So hang in there. We're making progress. And I shot a coat of lacquer on the far piece. That's the one that we've been working on this morning. And then I wrapped this other one up, and now all you see is the tops, and you can see we've got a dead-on color match between that one and this one. So when we strip this one, we're going to key off of that one to make sure that color match stays the same. So that's exactly what we hoped happened. Next step, we're stripping the finish off this one. And we're outside to strip this tabletop. We've got it wrapped up as I showed you before. I'm using liquid methylene chloride based stripper as always. Just apply it, keep it wet. Let it do the work. I always take note when I'm removing strip material of the color in the top coat. It can give you a really good clue as to how much color you may have to add to get back to where it was. And you can see I'm just keeping this wet. I can feel that this finish is already getting sticky and starting to goo up. And in just a second I'll show you pulling some off, and then I will just get to work here. And you always want to leave the stripper on long enough so it does its work, but for the purposes of the video, there you go. You can see the finish coming right off. And we do have a little bit of color in here, kind of a caramel brown, so we'll have to keep that in mind. Alright, let me get you turned off and let me get this stripped off. And we've got her stripped off, lacquer, scrubbed it with lacquer thinner and then wiped her down with water, and now she's drying. Looking at the field color, the darker color of the table, now with the finish off, that actually might be mahogany as well, just stained a different color. But again, I'm not an expert on wood identification, but if I had to guess, I'd say that's mahogany. It's darker mahogany and then lighter mahogany. And I've got the piece inside, and I'm getting ready to sand it, and I notice right here we've got a pretty good whack that's fairly deep into the veneer. So what I'm going to do is fill that in. What I'm using are these sticks. They're by Mohawk. I believe they call them hard fill, but they're I believe probably a wax and epoxy mix. They go on with a hot iron and melt in, and then you flatten them, and I'll show you how I do that. And what you do is you choose the lightest color in the field to make your match, fill your hole, then this acts like a heat sink and a press to push it down into the dent. And then you take this tool here, which is a plastic scraper, and you just gently over your repair. You drop the scraper on the floor like an idiot, but I hope you can see that's been filled in now. And if you need or you want, you can color cover the grain lines, carry the grain lines across. But that's how you do that. When you use this, you can use it over existing finish. Just make sure the finish is hard. The temptation sometimes is you shoot a top coat on there, you see a flaw in the finish, you say, well, let me grab this and finish it. And when you do this on a soft finish, you take it with you. So I would never use this on a finish that was less than 2 or 3 days old. You run the risk of having damage. But here, this is bare wood, and this is perfect for this kind of repair. So let me continue what I'm doing, and I'll bring you back. And I'm going to sand this piece down with 320 to start, and I'll do it on a block. And I'm just trying to get down any of the rough edges on the veneer, just like we did on the other piece. And again, use your hand to determine if you're smooth. Okay, this table's been sanded with 320, and then I finished up with some 600 just to get it as nice and smooth as I wanted it to be. All that roughness is gone. We did have an area right here where the grain on the mahogany banding had raised up in places, but we were able to get that sanded flat. So we're ready now to shoot a couple of coats of sealer on this. I will bring you back when that is done, because it's going to be exactly what we did to the other piece. And right now we've got a coat of lacquer on both of the pieces. This piece is still wet. This piece has been set up for an hour or so. What you'll notice on the colors is that this piece here, the one that we didn't strip, is a little bit browner. Look at the difference in the brown edges here versus the edges here of the light colored mahogany. So what we've got to do is tone this to bring it in line with this. It just needs some brown, a brown toner, like a perfect brown toner. So we get this tone to that, and that, which is a little bit less brown, a little bit more red, tone to that. And I've got you handheld here now, but I think you can see the difference. The lightness here versus the darkness there. And here's the toner color I mixed up. I hope you can see it in the bright light. It's a very light brown. We'll start laying it on and see how we do. Okay, here's one of the tables with one coat of lacquer on it. It's looking beautiful. And here's the other one. Uh-oh. What happened, you say? Well, good morning. It's the next morning. You can see the two pieces side by side. I think the color match is great. I'm going to rub them both out. I'm thinking about putting maybe just a little bit of black glaze on this one, but we'll see what it looks like when it's rubbed out. So here we go. I hope in this shot you can see that the feel of this panel, whether it's mahogany or walnut, is darker than this. This is a purer looking grain. This grain looks to have been intentionally modeled with some glaze. So what I'm going to do is I've mixed up some black glaze. Glaze, as you know, is a colored medium that's designed to go between top coats. And I'm going to put a little bit of black glaze on this piece to try to bring it in so they're not looking dissimilar. And I've cut the glaze with naphtha, as I often do, so it dries faster and thins it out so we can sneak up on the color. We've already had one instance on this project where I blew by the color and frankly, it's one too many for me. And I'm going to dry brush this out as it goes on. I think I want to use a little bit more color. And again, trying to go with the grain. Keep it natural looking. I don't think there's any reason to glaze heavily the sides or the border pieces, so I'm just going to leave them as they are. I'm going to come in with a little bit heavier color now, kind of accentuate some of the grain striping. And I think this is really going to help. You may see Stuart in the background. He's hunting. There's a bug in here and he doesn't like it. I think that helped. What do you think? I like it. Okay, next step is to top coat both of these with another coat of lacquer. Let it dry, we'll sand it down, we'll lacquer it, we'll sand it down, we'll lacquer it. That process is going to go on for a couple of days on and off. I'm not going to bring you along for every single coat of lacquer I shoot, but I will bring you back when it's time to polish these up and get these to their final level of gloss. Good morning and welcome back. We've let these tabletops sit for two and a half days now. Let that lacquer get good and hard. I sort of lost count, but I think we've got about 8 coats of top coat on this, including sealer. There may be 1 or 2 more. I honestly don't remember. But the next step now is to wet sand and polish this. I'll bring you in and show you what we're going to try to remove, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to do it, and then I'm going to do it, and then we'll see how these come out. So stick with us. I've put the macro lens on the camera to try to show you what we're going to be working to get rid of. And if you can see, this is my big fat finger here. If you look right in the light, you see that kind of like miniature moon crater. That's orange peel. That's what is left from the spray coat. And to get that out, you have to really micro sand and then polish. A high-end car paint job, that's what they do. So those little moon crater things is what we're going to be trying to get out as we do this polish job. And this is how they do a piano finish. Okay, this is the equipment we're going to be using when we polish. Well, most of the equipment we're going to be using when we polish. We're going to start out with wet sanding. As a lubricant, I like to use Wool Lube. It's actually a high-grade soap. It's clear and a gel, and you dissolve it in water. So in this container here, I've had soaking for several hours, various grits of wet dry paper starting at 600 and ending up at 2000. And they've been soaking in a solution of Wool Lube and water, and they're ready to go. Next to that, I have my air sander, which I'll be using, and I also have a sanding block. This is a piece of 400 wet dry. This is what I used between coats. I'm not going to use that now. I'm going to start with 600 and go up from there. So let's get started. Okay, I've got a solution of soap and water here for this first step, and a piece of 600 grit wet dry. And out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to do the 600 grit sanding by hand. I want to make sure I don't run the risk of burning through the edges. And I'm just sanding here, and the idea, and of course using a block, is to just take off the high spots. Any dust nits or little bumps that may have settled in the finish will get sheared right off, and then we'll start to work on that orange peel. I can feel the paper cutting. This very, very strong suction, and I'm dragging my fingers behind and I'm feeling the finish, and it feels very, very smooth. And I've dipped the paper in our Wool Lube solution and back at it.
you need to use an abundance of caution to make sure you don't get any contaminants in anything you're using here. The last thing you knew, there's a little piece of grit in your sandpaper, and then you go and you wind up putting scratches in your finish, and you're going to have to start over again.
And I hope you can see that by sanding with 600 wet dry that we've gotten rid of the orange peel that we had on the table. But now the finish is dull. That's because there's 600 grit scratches all over everything. So what we're going to do now is progressively go through the grits, make the scratches finer and finer, and then we're going to use a polishing compound to take the last of them out. I hope this shows you a good comparison of what we're accomplishing here. This is the table that we haven't done anything with. And you can see that we still have all that orange peel. Now, I mean, this is really fine examination of the finish, but this one is shiny now. It's shiny because it was shot with gloss lacquer. Now let's go over to the one that we've rubbed out or wet sanded, and you can see there's no more orange peel whatsoever. The finish, I hope it shows, is just beautiful. It looks like there's a piece of glass on it, but look at the difference in the gloss. And if we want to get that gloss up, we have to continue fine sanding and we have to polish it. But when it's done, it's going to be perfectly smooth. So there's nothing wrong with this. This is an off the gun finish, but this is a hand rub finish, and we're working on it now. And as we are finishing up our 600 grit wet sanding, I will often finish with some 4/0 steel wool and wool lube, which is what wool lube is designed for, and gently rub out the finish. And this will get the last of any low spots, and it also allows me to use a lot of control on the edges. If you've watched the channel before, I've always cautioned how easy it is to burn through the finish on the edges, and we don't want to do that. And again, all we're doing here effectively is trying to sand the top coat flat. We're sanding the lacquer, we're not sanding the wood. The flatter the lacquer coat is, the finer the finish, and eventually we'll get a nice gloss finish. Kind of making it like a mirror. Okay, let's break out the air sander, some 800 grit, and we'll get to work on this table. The reason I'm using the air sander is to make sure that everything stays nice and flat, and of course it's going to speed things up. If you're using a sander or any power tools at all, please be careful around the edges. And this is 800 grit, wet dry. It's been soaking for a while. Some soapy water. Here we go. Let's see how we did. And you can see how important it is to have a thick finish on when we're doing this technique, because each one of these steps is taking a little bit more of that lacquer coat off. Granted, it's just the high spots that are coming off, but if you don't have a thick enough coat, you're going to be through your top coat and into your color or into your wood in no time. That's looking really good. Okay, I'm going to repeat it on the next table and we'll keep moving on. Okay, we're on to the last step, which is to polish these off. I'm going to be using Meguiar's Mirror Glaze. It's an ultra finishing polish. I've got my Makita buffer, and we'll use some soap and water. We've got this sanded now to 2000 grit. I used the power sander at 800 grit. I did not like the control I had. I felt it was too aggressive. So the rest of the sanding stages I did by hand, and I'm happy the way it came out. So now we're just going to polish these tables up, and we're going to use our buffer like I said, and this compound. It's a very mildly abrasive compound, and it should bring the polish up beautifully on these tables. So let's get to it. Guys that are really good at this can put this stuff on and not splash it all over the place. I don't have that skill. And
And just like with the sander or with the hand sander, you have to be very careful around the edges. You don't want to burn through it.
And there is what we're working to achieve. All the scratches are gone. We have a nice deep gloss finish. Okay, and you can see that over here we don't have that, over here we don't have that. We're starting to get it here. Okay, I've got a lot of polishing to do, and I'll bring you back when I'm all through. And I hope you can see the gloss finish that we've brought up on this table that's been polished. And if I come over here to this one, you see it's still got all those little micro scratches in it, while this one has been polished off. All right, we're almost done. Let me get here's our finish. I hope you can see the difference between it and the off the gun finish. You don't see any of that orange peel, and everything is nice and flat. I'm really pretty happy with this. So there you go. All right, I'm going to touch the rest of these tables up for these folks, polish it up, and we'll get ready to get these out of here. So I'll bring you back for the final shots. Well, there you go. Two beautiful Thomasville End Tables from 1979 that really deserved to be brought back the way these were. That's a hand rub gloss finish. It's perfectly smooth. It came out great. And there you are. They came in for their 40-year tune-up. They got it, and they're ready to go back home. Well, listen, from our shop just outside Kennesaw here in North Georgia, thanks for watching. Best regards. Take good care, and remember, it's just wood, color, and some shiny stuff, and sometimes a whole heck of a lot of work to make that shiny stuff shiny. Well, take care. We'll see you next video. Bye.